Okay. So my screen is visible, right?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. So we'll start with Mangalacharan. Om Majnana Timirandasya Jnana Jana Sahakaya Chakshurumiltamena Tasmai Sri Gurave Nama Sri Tayanavano Vistam Stapnamena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeyam Sri Guru Sri Udapatakalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Sri Rupam Sagarjatam Sagana Raghunathan Vidam Samsajiyam Advaitam Savadutam Paljana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Sri Vishakan Vitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpati Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिपे वांछा कल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय Hare Krishna, thanks for attending today's session. So the title for today is Paraṁ Dhāma, Supreme Abode. Our previous session was titled Paraṁ Brahma, Supreme Brahman. So today it's regarding the Supreme Abode. Just a bit of intro from Bhagavad Gita, intro section. The living entities are traveling from one place to another, but it's not that we can go to any planet. We like merely by a mechanical arrangement. If we desire to go to other planets, there is a process for going there. This is also mentioned. Yanti Devrata Devan, Pitruyanti Pitruta. That's from Gita 9.25. No mechanical arrangement is necessary if we want interplanetary travel. The Gita instructs Yanti Devrata Devan. So those who desire to go to the planet of Devas, they can go there. The moon, the sun, and higher planets are called Swargaloka. There are three different status of planets: higher, middle, and lower planetary systems. So these also we saw in many of our previous sessions related to Prakriti, the material nature, the 14 planetary systems. So the three divisions. There are many descriptions from Srimad Bhagavatam, especially from the second canto. In the beginning of second canto, there's the conversation between Sukadeva Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj. Even in those chapters, Sukadeva Goswami gives a very surface level intro about the planetary systems. And then in chapters 5 and 6 of the second canto in Srimad Bhagavatam, there's this conversation between Narada Muni and Lord Brahma. So even in those chapters, we find more detailed explanation regarding the planetary systems. The 14 planetary systems, they are divided into the higher, middle, and lower planetary systems. And in the 6th chapter of second canto, Lord Brahma also describes how these planetary systems, they actually correspond to the universal form of the Supreme Lord. The Earth belongs to the middle planetary system. Bhagavad Gita informs us how to travel to the higher planetary systems, Devaloka, with a very simple formula. Yanti Devrata Devan. One need only worship the particular demigod of that particular planet, and in that way go to the moon, the sun, or any of the higher planetary systems. So even in chapter 9 of the Gita, this verse 9.25, and even actually there's a sequence of verses starting from 9.20 itself. So it's stated that we can engage in pious activity during our lifetime, and as we keep doing it, we will accumulate piety to elevate ourselves to the higher planetary systems. But still, all 14 of the all 14 of these planetary systems are still within the material universe. So if we engage in sinful behavior, we'll get degraded to the lower planetary systems, the hellish planets. But by accumulating piety, by following the karma kanda portions of the Vedic literature, we can accumulate piety to enjoy heavenly pleasures by elevating ourselves to the planet of Devas, the Swargaloka, or even we can even go up to Brahmaloka. But even by going there, if we try to go there with the intention of enjoying heavenly pleasures, the problem is that once we reach there, we will we can enjoy the heavenly pleasures. But once our piety expires, we still have to return to this Earth planet. So it's going to be like we'll be moving up and down these 14 planetary systems, like within the same bubble, meaning as we know from the Purusha avatars, starting from Mahavishnu, when he's within the Karana ocean, the water bubbles which emanate from his bodily pores, each of those bubbles form one material universe. One bubble forms one universe. So we are in our universe. We belong to the universe which is administered by the Chaturmukha Brahma, and merely by engaging in this karma kanda activities to accumulate piety for heavenly pleasures, we can simply move up to the upper planets, but still we will be forced to return to this Earth planet. So that's why it's very important to understand where we are currently. We have to really understand the mystery behind this one material universe where we are currently situated. And we also know that there are many other innumerable material universes in this entire material nature, because there are innumerable bubbles which emanate from the bodily pores of Mahavishnu, and we are in this universe, but there are many other innumerable universes in the entire material nature. So after understanding where we are currently, we have to know where how to go to the supreme abode. So merely by engaging in the karma kanda activities, we can only accumulate piety to enjoy heavenly pleasures, but still we have to return to this Earth planet once the piety expires. Yet Bhagavad Gita does not this material world, because even if we go to Brahmaloka, the highest planet, through some sort of mechanical contrivance, by maybe traveling for 40,000 years, and who live that long, we will still find the material inconveniences of birth, death, disease, and old age. But one who wants to approach the supreme planet, Krishna Loka, or any other planet within the spiritual sky, will not meet with these material inconveniences. Amongst all of the planets in the spiritual sky, there is one supreme planet called Goloka Vrindavana, the original planet in the abode of the original personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. All of this information is given in Bhagavad Gita, and we are given through its information how to leave the material world and begin a truly blissful life in the spiritual sky. So even if we elevate ourselves to the topmost planet in this material universe, that is Brahmaloka, we still have to suffer the four miseries, namely Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi, to which even Brahma is subjected to. Even Brahma cannot escape from Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi. Even after his 100 years, according to Brahma's calendar, once he, after he lives for 100 years, according to his calendar, even he has to die. So even the objective, main objective for Brahma is to engage in Krishna consciousness. Even he has to perform devotional service merely just because Brahma holds the position of being the topmost living entity in Brahmaloka. It doesn't mean that he can simply enjoy. He also has to engage in devotional service to elevate himself further to escape from this material world towards the spiritual sky. So that itself is the condition for Brahma, the topmost living entity. So we should not be misled by these conceptions of heaven, hell, heavenly pleasures. And the main point is that we have to understand that as long as we are trapped in this material universe, we will always be subject to the four miseries. And therefore, we should be very clear about our goal, that is the spiritual sky, in particular, Goloka Vrindavan. In 10.8, Gita 10.8, Krishna says, Aham sarvasya prabho, mattas sarvam pravartate, iti matva bhajanti mam, buddhavava samanita. I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise who perfectly know this, engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. So Krishna says that he is the source of all spiritual and material worlds, which means that he is the source and he is the supreme ruler of the entire creation, the spiritual sky and also the material universes. The entire creation is often equated to this lotus flower, where the stem actually forms 1/4 of the creation. The stem represents the material creation, and the flower itself, which forms 3/4, is equated to the spiritual sky. So the spiritual sky is known as Tripat Vibhuti, and 1/4, the remaining 1/4, that is the material creation, is known as Ekapada, that is 1/4. So it is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 2.6.19. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is to be known as the supreme reservoir of all material opulences by the 1/4 of his energy in which all the living entities exist. Deathlessness, fearlessness, and freedom from the anxieties of old age and disease exist in the kingdom of God, which is beyond the 3 higher planetary systems and beyond the material coverings. So the 1/4 of the entire creation represents the material universe. Like on the cover, front cover of Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, we can clearly see that this dark spot is actually this 1/4 of the entire creation, which is known as Ekapada, and that's described in 2.6.19. The remaining 3/4 of the entire kingdom of the Supreme Lord consists of the spiritual sky. So, as described earlier, the lotus flower, the topmost portion of the lotus flower represents Goloka Vrindavan. And also the it is surrounded by all the Vaikuntha planets, and the Brahmajyoti effulgence, which emanates from the Supreme Lord, is enough to illuminate the entire spiritual sky. So even the all these innumerable Vaikuntha planets, they are illuminated by the Brahmajyoti effulgence, which originates from the body of the Supreme Lord in Goloka Vrindavan. However, we are extremely unfortunate because we are trapped in this dark spot, which is called the Mahatattva, presided by Mahavishnu. And as described earlier, all the bubbles which emanate from his pores of his body, though each of those bubbles represents one material universe, but all the innumerable material universes are still within the this dark cloud, which is devoid of the effulgence from the Supreme Lord. So that's why we are trapped in this 1/4 of the entire creation. So our goal should be to first get out of this material universe, which we are currently in, and move towards the spiritual sky, towards the topmost destination, that is Goloka Vrindavan. Then in the next verse, 2:620, the spiritual sky is described. The spiritual world, which consists of 3/4 of the Lord's energy, is situated beyond this material world, and it is especially meant for those who will never be reborn. Others who are attached to family life and who do not strictly follow celibacy vows must live within the 3 material worlds. So again, as long as we are trapped in the dark cloud, we will always be subject to the miseries of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. So once we reach the spiritual sky, which is generally known as Vaikuntha, the place without anxiety, so we can be free from those miseries. Actually, that is our original position. We have actually degraded ourselves from the superior spiritual sky. Due to our material desires, we are trapped in this dark cloud. And in Gita chapter 15, the first few verses also talk about the relationship between the spiritual world and the material world. In 15.1, Krishna says, Sri Bhagavan Vacha, Urdo Moolam Madashakam, Ashwattam Prauravyayam, Chandam Siyasya Paranani, Yastam Veda Savedavit. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upward and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. So this imperishable banyan tree, which has its roots upward, is actually compared to, it's actually represented by this reflection of banyan tree on the, which is situated there on the river bank. Suppose if we have a banyan tree on the river bank, the reflection of that tree on the waters will be such that the roots will be like showing upwards. So the material world is actually a reflection of the spiritual world. It is often known as the corrupted or perverted reflection, because whatever beautiful aspects which are there in the spiritual world are all corrupted in this perverted reflection known as the material world. In 15.2, Krishna says, Adascha urdhvam prasitastasya shaka guna pravilda vishaya pravala adascha mulani anusantatani karmanu bandhini manushya loke. The branches of this tree extend downward and upward, nourished by the 3 modes of material nature. The twigs are the objects of the senses. This tree also has roots going down, and these are bound to the fruitive actions of human society. So we as human beings, we are prone to, or we are actually, we are predominantly dominated by the mode of passion. Like compared to the animal species, the animals are like more in the mode of ignorance, but we are like more in the mode of passion, and that's why we are always we are like more we have this tendency to always engage in fruitive activity, and as long as we are trapped in this material world, and as long as we engage in all these kind of fruitive activities, we will only be nourishing the influence of the 3 modes of material nature. That's why even in many of our previous sessions, we saw how important it is to transcend the 3 modes. Even like by default, we as human beings, we are dominated by the mode of passion. So we always engage in fruitive activity. We tend to, most of the non-devotees, they simply don't care about any spiritual aspects of life. They are always engaged in accumulating wealth. So they think that material wealth is everything. Engaging in spirituality and devotional service, they think that it's a waste of time. They always think that whatever time they have should be put to good use, meaning that they should only use their time to accumulate material wealth. But this is despite the fact that we have always seen how the threefold miseries of material nature always remind us how futile it is to keep engaging in fruitive activity. Because even the recent episode of pandemic had shown us how whatever material wealth which we accumulate will not accompany us when we leave the body. Of course, some people might say that the material wealth is important for their children and grandchildren, but nobody is going to remain here forever. That's the fact. A lot of people fail to understand this basic truth about how vulnerable we are to all this cycle of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. Failing to understand that, people always engage in fruitive activity and keep nourishing the three modes of material nature. By doing so, we will always be trapped in this material universe. We'll be moving up and down the 14 planetary systems, and we'll be taking up different apartments in the 84 lakh apartments. As we have seen in our previous sessions, there are 84 lakh species of material bodies. So as long as we don't engage in spiritual inquiry and engage in devotional service, we are going to be trapped in this material universe, and we'll be taking up different types of material bodies, and the cycle will keep going on. So that's why it's important to clearly understand where we are trapped currently, and also to understand why it's important to liberate ourselves. Then in 15.3, Krishna says, Na rupam asheha tatopa labhyate, nanto nachadil nacha sampratishta, ashwattamenam suviruddha moolam asanga sastrena drujena chitva. The real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. So in this verse, we can clearly see how messed up this material world is, and we are actually caught in a big mess. So it's not easy to liberate ourselves from this mess, which we ourselves got ourselves into due to our material desires. We are here because of our material desires. So we have no one else to blame but ourselves. However, Krishna says that, but with determination, one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment, meaning that it's not an easy task, but still we have to use the weapon of detachment to cut down this strongly rooted tree. Then in 15.4, Krishna says, Tata padam tat parimargitavyam yasmin gatana nivaltanti bhuya tammeva chadyam purusham prapadye yata pravati prasulta purani. Thereafter, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to that Supreme Personality of Godhead from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. So everything, meaning ourselves, we as living entities, and even this material nature, everything originated from the Supreme Lord, who is there in the spiritual sky. So it is important for us to return there, to put a full stop to these material miseries of being trapped in this vicious cycle of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. The only solution is to surrender to the Supreme Lord and attain the spiritual sky. So that is mentioned by Krishna himself in chapter 15. So the first few verses of chapter 15 clearly show the relationship between the material world and the spiritual world. And Krishna himself says how it all began, how we got caught up in this mess, and how we can liberate ourselves. Then in 15.5, Krishna says, Nirmana moha jita sanga dosha adhyatma nitya vinivritta kama dvandver vimukta sugadukka samye gachanti amuta padam vivayam tat. Those who are free from false prestige, illusion, and false association, who understand the eternal, who are done with material lust, who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who, unbewildered, know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. So this is like the prerequisite conditions for us to attain the spiritual sky. One of the most important condition is that it's Dvandvair Vimukta. We should be freed from dualities. As long as we are trapped in this material world, we will always be subject to dualities. Like as mentioned earlier, human beings are always prone to be engaged in fruitive activity, like accumulating material wealth. So we always think about profit, loss, happiness, distress, and all these dualities. So as long as we are trapped in those dualities, we'll keep nourishing the three modes of material nature, and only by transcending the three modes we can break free from these dualities. So that is a very important condition for us to liberate ourselves from this material world and to attain the spiritual sky. So in the 5th verse of chapter 15, Krishna mentions the prerequisite conditions or the qualifications required to attain the spiritual sky. Then in 15.6, Krishna says, "Na tat bhasete suryo na shashanko na pavaka yad gatva na niratanti tad Dhāma Paraṁ mama." That supreme abode of mine is not illuminated by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. So the important keyword here, tad Dhāma Paraṁ mama. The entire creation, like we saw the lotus flower, the 3/4 and 1/4 of it. So the entire creation all belongs to the Supreme Lord, but he himself distinguishes between his Param Dhāma, his supreme abode, and the rest of the creation. So even in chapter 8, Krishna clearly says how this material world is Dukkalayam Ashashvatam in 8.15. And then he in chapter 15 also he says, he talks about Param Dhāma. Even in chapter 8 itself, in 8.21 also, Krishna mentions a similar verse, which also ends with Tad Dhāma Param mama in 8.21. So in many places, Krishna clearly distinguishes between the current material universe in which we are trapped in. He mentions why it's important for us to liberate ourselves from this Dukkalayam, and where we should be headed to from here. So everything is explained clearly in the Gita by Krishna himself. So it's entirely up to us to chalk out our future, whether we are going to think of spiritual inquiry as a waste of time and accumulate material wealth, because even if we are going to have that kind of mentality, even after getting this human form of life, if we are still going to think like animals, because even animals like street dogs, they also have this anxiety of how to of their own bread and butter issues. They also always have this anxiety of how to get food. So if we are only going to be always focused on how to accumulate material wealth, then we are no better than those street dogs. So that's a very sad thing. Like despite getting the human form of life, if we ourselves choose to live like street dogs, then of course we are likely to get that particular material body in the next birth. The spiritual world, the supreme abode of Krishna, which is known as Krishna Loka, Goloka Vrindavan, is described here. In the spiritual sky, there is no need of sunshine, moonshine, fire, or electricity, because all the planets are self-luminous. We have only one planet in this universe, the sun, which is self-luminous. This is in the material universe. But all the planets in the spiritual sky are self-luminous. The shining effulgence of all those planets, called Vaikunthas, constitutes the shining sky known as the Brahmajyoti. Actually, the effulgence is emanating from the planet of Krishna, Goloka Vrindavan. Part of that shining effulgence is covered by the Mahatattva, the material world. Other than this, the major portion of that shining sky is full of spiritual planets which are called Vaikunthas, chief of which is Goloka Vrindavan. So there's also this confusion regarding this term of Vaikuntha. So Vaikuntha is like a very general term to describe the spiritual sky. The entire spiritual sky is often known as Vaikuntha because it is described as the place where there is no anxiety. Vaikuntha, meaning without anxiety. So all the planets in the spiritual sky are actually Vaikuntha planets. But the chief, as mentioned here, the chief of the Vaikuntha planets, or like the HQ of the all other Vaikuntha planets, is Goloka Vrindavan. Golokadam is like the HQ of the entire Vaikuntha Loka region. So all the innumerable Vaikuntha planets are illuminated by the Brahmajyoti effulgence, which emanates from the body of the Supreme Lord, who is there in Goloka Vrindavan. So the perverted tree of this material world, as mentioned in the first from the first verse of chapter 15. So we have to liberate ourselves from this material world, which is the perverted reflection of the spiritual world. Upon achieving that, we won't be forced to come back here. In this conditional life, the living entity considers himself to be the lord of this material world, but in his liberated state, he enters into the spiritual kingdom and becomes an associate of the Supreme Lord. So it is stated here, in his conditional life, the living entity considers himself to be the lord of this material world. So that is our real position, where we are deluded by this impression that we are the lord of this material world, because we actually degraded ourselves from the spiritual sky to this material world due to our material desires. And we tend to have this foolish impression that we are actually lording over this material nature. But the exact opposite is true, because even in Gita 3.27, it stated that we are all always subject to the three modes of material nature. In 3.27, it stated, Prakriti Kriyamanani Gunai Karmani Sarvasha Ankara Vimudatma Kartayamidi Manyate. So we are all puppets at the hands of the three puppeteers, the three modes of material nature. However, due to our deluded state, we tend to think that we are controlling material nature. But in fact, the exact opposite is true. So that's why it's important for us to liberate ourselves from this place and become an associate of the Supreme Lord in the spiritual sky. There he enjoys eternal bliss, eternal life, and full knowledge, meaning Satchit Ananda. So this is also a very important distinction between the material world and the spiritual world, because in this material world, we are always looking for happiness. As mentioned earlier, in the material world, we will always be subject to dualities like happiness and distress. Even in Gita verse 2.14, Krishna says, Matra Svashastu Kaunteya, Sidoshna Sugadukata, Agama Paino Anitya, Tam Stitik Sashva Bharata. So Krishna equates the conditions of happiness and distress to the changing seasons, like summer and winter, Sidoshna Sugadukata. So as long as we are trapped in this material world, we will always be subject to the dualities like happiness and distress, and they are sure to happen, just like how all these seasons keep changing. Like now summer has already started, so it will go on for some time, and then we'll be experiencing winter, and then again the cycle will continue. So similarly, in this material world, we are always looking for happiness, but even after a momentary period of happiness, distress is sure to follow. So that's why it's futile to remain in this material world and look for happiness. Real intelligence is to look for eternal bliss, ananda, in the spiritual sky. One should be captivated by this information. He should desire to transfer himself to that eternal world and extricate himself from this false reflection of reality. For one who is too much attached to this material world, it's very difficult to cut that attachment. But if he takes to Krishna consciousness, there is a chance of gradually becoming detached. One has to associate himself with devotees, those who are in Krishna consciousness. One should search out a society involved in Krishna consciousness and learn how to discharge devotional service. In this way, he can cut off his attachment to the material world. One cannot become detached from the attraction of the material world simply by dressing himself in saffron cloth. He must become attached to the devotional service of the Lord. Therefore, one should take it very seriously that devotional service, as described in the 12th chapter, is the only way to get out of this false representation of the real tree, meaning the material world. In chapter 14, the contamination of all kinds of processes by material nature is described. So in chapter 14, it's about the three modes of material nature. Only devotional service is described as purely transcendental. So that is described in 14.26. In chapter 14, all the concepts related to the three modes of material nature are described. And towards the end, in 14.26, Krishna talks about how to transcend the modes. The words Paraṁ Mama are very important here. Actually, every nook and corner is the property of the Supreme Lord. But the spiritual world is Paramam, full of six opulences. So the entire creation, the material and spiritual worlds, belong to the Supreme Lord. But he himself distinguishes between his supreme abode and the rest of his creation. So he himself endorses why that place is very special, and he himself wants us to join him there. That's what he wants us to understand every time he incarnates himself in this material world. And regarding devotional service, for devotees, the basic difference between devotees who are engaged in devotional service and non-devotees who are going after material wealth and sense gratification is that devotees are dominated by the superior internal energy of Krishna, and non-devotees are also dominated by the inferior external energy of Krishna, but those non-devotees don't know that they are being dominated. Either ways, we are sure to be subjects of Krishna. There's no way we can escape from his influence, but he makes us feel like we are able to exploit this material world. But it's important for us to understand why we should not be deluded by such false illusion. The Katha Upanishad also confirms that in the spiritual world, there is no need of sunshine, moonshine, or stars. Na tatra suryo bhati na chandra tarakam. For the whole spiritual sky is illuminated by the internal potency of the Supreme Lord. That supreme abode can be achieved only by surrender and by no other means. So the supreme abode, as described earlier using the lotus analogy, the topmost part of the lotus flower, the entire creation is Goloka Vrindavan, and all the other Vaikuntha planets also receive the illumination of the Brahma Jyoti. But since we are trapped in the dark cloud of Mahatattva, so we are devoid of that light of Brahma Jyoti. Here, this being trapped in this darkness has two meanings. One means that we are devoid of light, the light of Brahma Jyoti, and it also means that we are devoid of the light of knowledge. So as long as we are trapped in this dark cloud, the dark spot, we'll always remain in ignorance, and we'll be subject to the vicious cycle of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. This verse 15.6, gives a description of the material conception of the sky, and we think of it in relationship to the sun, moon, stars, and so on. But in this verse, the Lord states that in the eternal sky, there's no need for the sun nor for the moon, nor electricity or fire of any kind, because the spiritual sky is already illuminated by the Brahmajyoti, the rays emanating from the Supreme Lord. We are trying with difficulty to reach other planets, but it is not difficult to understand the abode of the Supreme Lord. This abode is referred to as Goloka. In the Brahma Samhita 5.37, it is beautifully described. Goloka eva nivasati akilatma bhuta. The Lord resides eternally in his abode Goloka, yet he can be approached from this world. And to this end, the Lord comes to manifest his real form, Sachidananda Vigraha. When he manifests this form, there is no need for our imagining what he looks like. So the conception regarding Brahmajyoti and even the Swayam Rupa of Krishna, these are also very important concepts which will completely demolish the other schools of thought who talk about impersonalism and also merging in the Brahmajyoti. There are more than enough verses in the Gita itself to prove why all those notions are inaccurate. For example, in 14.27, Krishna himself says, Brahmanoi Pratishtaham, and I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal, and is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness. So Krishna himself says that he is the source of the impersonal Brahmajyoti. So it is not that impersonal Brahmajyoti is the ultimate destination. There is the ultimate destination is like beyond Brahmajyoti itself. In the effulgent rays of the spiritual sky, there are innumerable planets floating. The Brahmajyoti emanates from the supreme abode, Krishna Loka, and the Ananda Maya, Chinmaya planets, which are not material, float in those rays. The Lord says, Na tat bhasayate suryo, na shashanko, na pavaka, yad gadva na nivartante, tat Dhāma Paraṁ mama. One who can approach that spiritual sky is not required to descend again to the material sky. In the material sky, even if we approach the highest planet, Brahmaloka, what to speak of the moon, we will find the same conditions of life, namely birth, death, disease, and old age. No planet in the material universe is free from these four principles of material existence. So this has been already described earlier, like how even if we attain Brahmaloka, we will still be subject to the four miseries. So we don't even have to think about Swargaloka and heavenly pleasures. Then in 15.7 also, Krishna says, Mamayvamso Jivaloke, Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, Manasashtan Indrani, Prakritistani Karasati. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. So Krishna himself acknowledges how we are suffering in this material world with our six senses, the material senses. So there are actually two important points in this verse. One is regarding how we are eternal fragmental parts of Krishna, and regarding how we are actually struggling due to conditioned life. So since we are struggling as conditioned souls, it is important for us to regain our original constitutional position as parts and parcels, eternal parts and parcels of Krishna. And even in this verse, when Krishna says that all the living entities are his eternal fragmental parts. So as we saw in our previous session titled Paraṁ Brahma, Supreme Brahman, we clearly saw the conclusion of how when we say that when we say Aham Brahmasmi or Sarvam Idam Kalu Brahmam, it doesn't mean that we are equal to the Supreme Brahman, but we are actually parts and parcels of the Supreme Brahman. So even in this verse, Krishna says that Mamayanso Jivaloki Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, we are eternal fragmental parts. Eternal fragmental parts means that we have always been eternally fragmental parts of Krishna. We are parts and parcels of Krishna, but we have been eternally fragmented, meaning that we have always had this individual identity of ours. So all the other schools of thought which say that, which talk about merging into God, which talk about impersonalism and all that. So all those false, inaccurate notions can be demolished with this one verse itself, because here it's clearly stated that all living entities are eternal fragmental parts. So there was never a time when we were merged into Krishna, and it's not like after quitting our material body, we are going to merge into Krishna again. We will always remain as eternal fragmental parts. We are parts and parcels of the Supreme Brahman, but we are eternal fragmented parts. So that is also very important to understand, because even if we look at the spiritual sky, even there Krishna is for example, even the Goloka region is divided into three parts. Vrindavan capacity, he is there in his Swayam Rupa as he is there in his Swayam Rupa as Krishna in Vrindavan, but he is also present in his expansions in the other dhams like Mathura and Dwaraka. And then between Goloka and Vaikuntha Loka, there's Ayodhya Dham. So in all these dhams, Krishna's expansions are also present as individuals. So why should we fool ourselves by thinking that we are going to be merging into God with all those false notions of other schools of thought? Because in this one verse itself, it's clearly stated how we will remain as eternal fragmental parts. The Supreme Lord and his transcendental parts and parcels are the living entities. The combined association of the Supreme Lord and the living entities in the Sanatana abode is the perfection of human life. The Lord is very kind to the living entities because they are his sons. Lord Krishna declares in Bhagavad Gita, Sarva Yonisu Kaunteya, in this from chapter 14, 14.3. Krishna says how he is the source or the seed-giving father. Of course, there are all types of living entities according to their various karmas, but here the Lord claims that he is the father of all of them. Therefore, the Lord descends to reclaim all of these fallen conditioned souls, to call them back to the Sanatana eternal sky, so that the Sanatana living entities may regain their eternal Sanatana positions in eternal association with the Lord. The Lord comes himself in different incarnations, or he sends his confidential servants as sons or his associates or acharyas to reclaim the conditioned souls. So all the living entities who are trapped in the material world are known as conditioned souls, and this term living entity applies to all, meaning not just being, even animals and plants, all are conditioned living entities. So Krishna himself wants us to join him in the spiritual sky. And regarding this term Sanatana, and also when we talk about Sanatana Dharma, it's also mentioned in the intro part of Bhagavad Gita as it is, where Srila Prabhupada clearly explains the distinction between the term Dharma and religion. Dharma is the original constitutional position of living entities. We as living entities, we are originally and eternally parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. So that is our original constitutional position. That is our eternal Dharma. That is Sanatana Dharma. And this conception of religion is actually a degraded concept which cannot be equated to Sanatana Dharma. According to Sanatana Dharma, all living entities are parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. And therefore, we should always mind our own business of how we can go back to Godhead. That should be our only business. But the business of religion is a completely corrupted and perverted reflection of the original and beautiful concept of Dharma. So there's no way Dharma can be equated to religion. So there are many concepts in our Dharma which cannot be explained using English terms. So they are known as non-translatables, like Dharma cannot be equated to religion. So Dharma is actually the original constitution of living entities, not just human beings, but all living entities. So our only business is to engage in devotional service and attain the spiritual sky to regain our association with the Supreme Lord. So all of us, we are already in a fallen condition. So we have no business of telling others that what you're doing is wrong. Not do it this way. You should not worship this. You should not worship that. The business of doing that dharmam to sakshat bhagavad pranitam. Dharma is what is prescribed by the Supreme Lord. So we have to simply follow his instructions as it is from the scriptures and focus on our own journey to attain the spiritual sky or the Supreme Abode. Of course, there are also a few verses from chapter 8 which are related to the Supreme Abode. Like in 8:15, Krishna says, Antakale Chamameva Smaran Muktva Kalevaram. Ya Prayati Ya Vinashyata Samshaya. And whoever at the end of his life, which his body remembering me, attains my nature. Of this, there is no doubt. Excuse me, Mataji, please mute. And whoever at the end of his life quits his body, remembering me alone, attains my nature. Of this, there is no doubt. So here, Krishna gives the simple formula of how we can attain the Supreme Abode. Though it may appear to be simple, it is not as easy as that, because we cannot remember Krishna at the end of our life unless we engage in devotional service and continue to remember him throughout our life. So that's also a very important point regarding why we should engage in Krishna consciousness, how we should develop the consciousness so that we can remember him at the end of our life. Also in 8:15, Krishna says, Ma upetya punarjanma dukkalayam ashashvatam. Nāptuvanti mahatmana samsiddhim paramam gata. After attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. So Krishna himself says, this is dukkalayam ashashvatam. So that's why we have to seriously be engaged in spiritual inquiry and devotional service. 8:16, A Brahma Bhuvana Loka Punaravartino Arjuna Mahampeti to Kaunteya Punarjanmana Vidyati. From the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery, wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains to my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. So Krishna clearly says why this place is Dukkalayam Ashashvatam, and not just the middle earth planet, but the entire 14 planetary systems, upper, middle, and lower, all are places of misery. So Krishna himself clearly explains why it is so important to liberate ourselves from this fallen condition. 8:17, Sahasra Yuga Paryantam Aryad Brahmano Vidu Ratrim Yuga Sahasrantam Teo Ratra Vido Jana. By human calculation, 1,000 ages taken together form the duration of Brahma's one day, and such also is the duration of his night. 8:18, Sarva Aragame Ratri Agame Praliyante Tatrayakta Samyake. At the beginning of Brahma's day, all living entities become manifest from the unmanifest state, and thereafter, when the night falls, they are merged into the unmanifest again. So even during the lifetime of Brahma, when during the daytime of Brahma, this material creation becomes manifest, and then during his night, it goes to the unmanifest state. Then on the following day, it becomes manifest again. So even during the lifetime of Brahma himself, in every day of Brahma, we are switching between these different states from manifest to unmanifest state. So that's why this place is known as Dukkalayam Ashashvatam, meaning the temporary material world, remains manifest for some time during the day of Brahma, and then it becomes unmanifest at his during his night. भूतग्राम एवं भूतो भूत्वा प्रलीयते रात्रि आगमे वर्षपाता प्रभवति ahara agame. Again and again, when Brahma's day arrives, all living entities come into being, and with the arrival of Brahma's night, they are helplessly annihilated. So this regarding our helpless condition of how we are trapped in the cycle, the vicious cycle. So we come into being and then we are annihilated. And during each journey, we take up different material bodies. So it is likely to continue as long as we don't realize the supreme absolute truth. Parastasmatu bhavavanyo avyakto avyaktat sanatana yasa sarveshu bhuteshu nashyatsu na vinashyati. Yet there is another unmanifest nature which is eternal and is transcendental to this manifested and unmanifested matter. It is supreme and is never annihilated. When all in this world is annihilated, that part remains as it is. So this material world keeps switching between manifest and unmanifest conditions. There's always this cycle going on. But there's another unmanifested world, that is the spiritual world, which is the supreme, and it is never annihilated. So this is the distinction between the material world and spiritual world. 8.21 Avyakto akshara iti uttas tammao paramam gatim yam prapyarna nivartante tad Dhāma paramam mama. That which the Vedantis describe as unmanifest and infallible, that which is known as the supreme destination, that place from which, having attained it, one never returns. That is my supreme abode. So there is also even this verse ends with tad Dhāma paramam mama, like 15.6. So where Krishna clearly describes about the supreme abode. Okay, it's 8:30 now. Shall we have a break for 5 minutes?
Yes, sure, Prabhu.
We'll meet after 5 minutes.
Yes.
Hare Krishna. Can we continue? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Oh, can we continue?
Yes.
Okay. So in the previous verse, we saw from 8.21 regarding how Krishna distinguishes between the material world and his supreme abode. And also in 9.20, Krishna says, Traividyamam Soma Paputa Papa Yagneristva Swargatim Prartayante Te Punyamasadya Surendrolokam Ashnanti Divyan Divideva Bhogan. Those who study the Vedas and drink the Soma juice seeking the heavenly planets worship me indirectly. Purified of sinful reactions, they take birth on the pious heavenly planet of Indra, where they enjoy godly delights. But in 9.21, Krishna also says, Te tam uktva swargalokam vishalam hine punya maltyalokam vishanti evam trayi dharmam anuprapanna gatagatam kama kama lavanti. When they have thus enjoyed vast heavenly sense pleasure and the results of their pious activities are exhausted, they return to this mortal planet again. Thus, those who seek sense enjoyment by adhering to the principles of the three Vedas achieve only repeated birth and death. So, Krishna keeps emphasizing about the supreme abode, why it's important for us to aim to go there and not to the heavenly planets. That is also explained in these verses. So it's very important that we are not driven to engage in the karma kanda activities of the Vedic literature. The best solution is to engage in devotional service to attain the supreme abode. We will also get the results of doing the karma kanda activities, but still the impermanence of those results are clearly explained by Krishna in these verses. So that's why it's important to first liberate ourselves from here in this from this material world. But we must make sure that we don't merely get out from this middle earth planet and simply go to Swargaloka, because it has been clearly explained why it's not a very wise thing to do. So we must be clear about our ultimate goal. So we have also studied regarding three types of activities like karma, akarma, vikarma. So by engaging in vikarmas, actions which are opposed to the scriptural injunctions, will be degraded to the hellish planets. If we merely engage in fruitive activity with no spiritual inquiry at all, we are likely to remain in this earth planet. But there's always the risk of further degradation. But at least with some spiritual inquiry, we might be able to elevate ourselves to the upper planetary systems. But all 14 are still within the same bubble. So it is important to get out of this one bubble and also to get out of the entire dark cloud and to aim for the supreme abode. And in 9.25, Krishna says, Yanti Devrata Devan, Pitru Yanti Pitruta, Bhutani Yanti Bhuteja, Yanti Madhyajino Pimam. Those who worship the demigods will take birth among the demigods. Those who worship the ancestors go to the ancestors. Those who worship ghosts and spirits will take birth among such beings. And those who worship me will live with me. So it is entirely up to us. Krishna gives us unlimited freedom of what we want to do. And he also gives that that magical formula of how we can attain his supreme abode. Those who worship me will live with me. So from here, it's clearly explained by Krishna how he respects the individual freedom of all living entities. But at the same time, he also recommends the importance of worshipping him so that we can live with him. Again, he says we can live with him, not to merge within him or something like that. So we have actually seen, so far we have been seeing the distinction between the spiritual and material worlds, and also why it's important to get out of the material world. So we'll also be seeing the what is beyond this material world. In Brahma Samhita 5.43 stated, Golokanamni nijadamni talecha tasya devi mahesha haridama suteshu teshu te prabhavat nishaya vihitasya yena govindamadi purusham tamaham vajami. Lowest of all is located Devi Dhāma, mundane world. Next above it is Mahesha Dhāma, abode of Mahesha. Above Mahesha Dhāma is placed Hari Dhāma, abode of Hari. And above them all is located Krishna's own realm named Goloka. I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, who has allotted their respective authorities to the rulers of those greater realms. So this is by Lord Brahma. The scriptures clearly explain the distinction between all the different dhams. So we are currently in the Devi Dhama under her influence, under Maya Devi's influence. So as long as we are trapped here, we'll always be subject to Maya, which is the inferior energy of Krishna. So Krishna wants us to move towards his superior internal energy in the spiritual sky. So between the two worlds, material world and spiritual world, is Mahesha Dhama. Mahesha Dhama is like the transitory passage between the two worlds. And then beyond that, there's Hari Dhama, all the Vaikuntha Lokas, and above that is Goloka. The realm of Goloka stands highest above all others. Brahma, looking up to the higher position of Goloka, is speaking of the other realms from the point of view of his own realm. The first in order of this mundane world called Devi Dhama, consisting of 14 worlds, Satyaloka, etc. Next above Devi Dhama is located Shiva Dhama, one portion of which is called Mahakala Dhama, is enveloped in darkness. In interpenetrating this portion of Shiva Dhama, there shines the Sadashiva Loka, full of great light. So since Mahesha Dhama is between the two worlds, it is like half of it is part of the material world, that is the Mahakala Dhama. So that is trapped in darkness, but another portion of it is already there in the spiritual sky. So that is Sadashiva Loka. So the original the original identity of Shiva is that of Shambhu. So Shambhu is the original identity of Shiva, and his expansions as Lord Shiva are there in the material world. Above the same appears Hari Dhama, or the transcendental Vaikuntha Loka, the potency of Devi Dhama in the form of the extension of Maya, and that of Shiva Loka, consisting of time, space, and matter, are the potency of the separated particles pervaded by the penumbral reflection of the subjective portion of the divinity. But Hari Dhama is ever resplendent with transcendental majesty, and the great splendor of all sweetness predominates over all other majesties in Goloka. The Supreme Lord Govinda, by his own direct and indirect power, has constituted those respective potencies of those realms. So all these dhams, they originated from the supreme abode, that is Goloka. So we spoke of Shambhu. His position is also explained in Srimad Bhagavatam 12, 13, 16. In the last chapter of Bhagavatam, Nimnakanam yata Ganga devanam achito yata Vaishnavanam yata Shambhu Purananam idam tata. Just as the Ganga is the greatest of all rivers, Lord Achyuta, the supreme among deities, and Lord Shambhu, the greatest of Vaishnavas, So Srimad Bhagavatam is the greatest of all Puranas. So Shambhu or Shiva has this special position of being the topmost Vaishnava. So he connects the two worlds. So that is his exalted position as the supreme Vaishnava. But of course, there's all these other schools of thought which talk about the distinction between Shaivism and Vaishnavism. There's this all these needless controversies because in the scriptures it is clearly stated that Shiva is the supreme or topmost Vaishnava. So there's no need for all these endless controversies. Everything can be cleared simply by following the scriptures. So just a quick recap of what we have already seen in one of our previous sessions. We saw this portion in one of our previous sessions titled Supreme Absolute Truth, Paraṁ Satyam. So there we saw these different qualities. Actually, these are the prominent qualities. There are 64 prominent qualities of Krishna. So out of which Jiva Tattva can attain up to 50 of those qualities. Then beyond the Jiva Tattva is Shiva Tattva. So Shiva Tattva has up to 55 qualities. So that's why Shiva is like the bridge between Jiva Tattva and Vishnu Tattva. So he is like the bridge between the material and spiritual world. Then beyond Shiva Tattva is Vishnu Tattva, up to 60 qualities. And beyond Vishnu Tattva is Krishna, who has all 64 qualities. So actually we have seen this part in detail. So this is just a quick recap because we can clearly see the hierarchy of these tattvas and they are clearly corresponding to the arrangement of the dhams from Devi Dhāma, Mahesh Dhāma, Hari Dhāma and Goloka. So again, this is the summary. Jiva Tattva, Shiva Tattva, Vishnu Tattva and Krishna, the topmost. So Shiva Tattva is between Jiva Tattva and Vishnu Tattva. So even the dhams, if you look at Mahesh Dham, it's between the material world and the spiritual world. Now, just to distinguish between these two terms, the spiritual sky is generally known as Vaikuntha, but as mentioned earlier, the Goloka Dham is actually the HQ of the entire Vaikuntha region, the spiritual sky. The HQ of the entire spiritual sky is Goloka Dham, and all the other planets are generally known as Vaikuntha. So in the term Vaikuntha, Vai simply means no or without, Kunta means anxiety. So Vaikuntha is that place without anxieties. So as long as we reach the spiritual sky, if we land in any of the Vaikuntha planets, we can be liberated from the material anxieties in this material world. But the Vaikuntha planets are specifically known as Vishnu Loka. So we also saw the difference between Vishnu Tattva and Krishna Tattva. Now regarding Goloka, Go means cow, Loka means planet. Goloka is the planet of Govinda or Gopala. The cowherd boy is engaged there in his eternal pastimes. So Goloka is also known as Krishna Loka. So in Vaikuntha, Krishna is present in his Vishnu or Narayana form, but in Goloka, Krishna is there in his Swayam Rupa. So this distinction is also often explained like a father who is there in his home in his original identity, but when he goes to the office, he puts his suit, business suit, and he is more engaged in a more formal position. So even in Vaikuntha, those who attain Vaikuntha will be engaged in service of Narayana in a very formal way, but in Goloka, it is a more informal and more pleasurable way of the association. So in Brahma Samhita 5.29, the Supreme Abode is also explained. The attributes of the Supreme Abode. Chintamani, transcendental gem. The Supreme Lord of Goloka. Kamadhenus, cows yielding the fulfillment of desire, give milk when they are milked, but Kamadhenus of Goloka pour forth oceans of milk in the shape of the fountain of love, showering transcendental bliss that does away with the hunger and thirst of all pure devotees. The words Laksha and Sahasrashata signify endless numbers. The word Sambrahma or Sadhara indicates being saturated with love. Here, Lakshmi denotes Gopi. Adi Purusha means he who is the primal Lord. The Swayam Rupa of Krishna in his Supreme Abode, Goloka, also described in 509 of Brahma Samhita. So in Goloka Dham, Krishna is present there in his Swayam Rupa, the two-handed Shama Sundara form. So in the Goloka region itself is divided into Goloka Vrindavan, Mathura, and Dwarka. So there are various expansions of Krishna, beginning from his Swayam Rupa. There are expansions where there are various expansions of Krishna in Goloka itself, because there are Vrindavan, Mathura, and Dwarka dhams. So in all the different dhams, he is engaged in his eternal pastimes in his different expansions. So even within the spiritual sky, Krishna is engaged in his pastimes in different expansions. Then within Goloka, we have the Adi Chaturvyuha, the primary Chaturvyuha, from where Sankarsana, the Adi Sankarsana becomes the source for the expansion of the Narayana forms in Vaikuntha region. Now, just a reference towards Ram Leela, because since we have seen regarding this Chaturvyuha form, in Srimad Bhagavatam 9th canto, chapter 10. Chapter 10 is regarding Ram Leela. Chapter 11 is regarding Ram Rajya. In the second verse of chapter 10, 9th canto, being prayed for by the demigods, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth himself directly appeared with his expansion and expansions of the expansion. Their holy names were Rama, Lakshmana, Bharata, and Shatrugna. These celebrated incarnations thus appeared in four forms as the sons of Maharaj Dashrath. Lord Ramachandra and his brothers, Lakshmana, Bharata, and Shatrugna, are all Vishnu Tattva, not Jiva Tattva. The Supreme Personality of Godhead expands into many, many forms, Advaitam, Achyutam, Anati, Mananta Rupam. Although they are one and the same, Vishnu Tattva has many forms and incarnations. As confirmed in the Brahma Samhita 509, Rama Dimutisu Kalaniyamena Tishtan, the Lord is situated in many forms, such as Rama, Lakshmana, Bharata, and Shatrugna, and these forms may exist in any part of his creation. All these forms exist permanently, eternally, as individual personalities of Godhead, and they resemble many candles, all equally powerful. Lord Ramachandra, Lakshmana, Bharata, and Shatrugna, who being Vishnu Tattva are all equally powerful, became the sons of Maharaj Dashrath in response to the prayers by the demigods. So these four Vishnu Tattvas, they are like the Chaturvyuhas, and there's always this term used by Prabhupada. He uses the term plenary expansions. So all the expansions are known as plenary expansions because they are equally good. Though they originate from the Swayam Rupa of Krishna, every expansion is equally powerful as Krishna himself. It's just like, as I also explained in one of the previous sessions, it's like how we light up many ghee lamps, but the altar lamp is like the Swayam Rupa of Krishna, but the various, the inaugural ghee lamps that we light up, they are like the various expansions, which are equally powerful. Then in the next verse, O King Parikshit, the transcendental activities of Lord Ramachandra have been described by great saintly persons who have seen the truth. Because you have heard again and again about Lord Ramachandra, the husband of Mother Sita, I shall describe these activities only in brief. Please listen. So the main reason why I brought up this verse is just to highlight these important points in the purport by Srila Prabhupada, because especially if we look at the Ramayana, there have always been various misleading versions, because even if you look at the translations like Kamba Ramayanam or Ramcharitramanas, translations are best if they remain as translations. They should not distort the original meaning. However, some of these authentic versions, which are often regarded as bona fide versions, they have also kind of distorted the original meanings in some ways. And also we have many other additions by so-called intellectuals and atheists who interpret everything according to their own ways. But it is best for us to always stick to the original Valmiki Ramayana. So Prabhupada has clearly explained in the purport, modern Rakshasas posing as educationally advanced merely because they have doctorates have tried to prove that Lord Ramachandra is not the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but an ordinary person. But those who are learned and spiritually advanced will never accept such notions. They will accept the descriptions of Lord Ramachandra and his activities only as presented by Tattvadarshis, those who know that true truth. In Bhagavad Gita 4.34, the Supreme Personality of Godhead advises that vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevya upadekshanti te jnanam jnananas tattvadarshinaha. Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because he has seen the truth. Unless one is a Tattvadarshi, in complete knowledge of the absolute truth, one cannot describe the activities of the personality of Godhead. So, especially for Ramayana, because there are a lot of these atheist rascals are hell-bent on distorting the original Ramayana. So, at least for devotees, we have to be very careful, and it's best for us to stick to the original Valmiki Ramayana, which consists of the 24,000 verses. So, just thought of highlighting this point. Therefore, although there are so many so-called Ramayanas or histories of Lord Ramachandra's activities, some of them are not actually authoritative. Sometimes Lord Ramachandra's activities are described in terms of one's own imaginations, speculations, or material sentiments. But the characteristics of Lord Ramachandra should not be handled as something imaginary. While describing the history of Lord Ramachandra, Sukadeva Goswami told Maharaj Parikshit, you have already heard about the activities of Lord Ramachandra. Apparently, therefore, 5,000 years ago, there were many Ramayanas or histories of Lord Ramachandra's activities. And there are many still. But we must select only those books written by Tattvadarshis, Jnananas Tattvadarshina, not the books of so-called scholars who claim knowledge only on the basis of a doctrine. This is a warning by Sukadeva Goswami, Rishibhis Tattvadarshibhis. Although the Ramayana composed by Valmiki is a huge literature, the same activities are summarized here by Sukadeva Goswami in a few verses. So we can clearly see that in the 9th canto, chapter 10, even Sukadeva Goswami, such an exalted devotee, he himself kind of refrains from going into so much detail. He himself kind of recommends to the original Valmiki Ramayana. So just wanted to highlight this. It's best for us to really search for the authentic version, and all the other editions, especially those written by rascals posing as academics, those belong to the garbage bin. So previously I was talking about Golokadam. So between Golokadam and Haridam, there's Ayodhya Dham. And in Haridam, which consists of all these innumerable Vaikuntha planets, Krishna is present there in his four-handed Narayana form. So as long as we attain Haridam, which is already part of the spiritual sky, we can enjoy association of Lord Narayana. But the position of Lord Narayana is in a very formal position. So if we go to Goloka, it is a more pleasurable and enjoyable association with the cowherd boy. Then in the Vaikuntha region, so as explained, the Adi Chaturvyuha, especially Adi Sankarsana, becomes the source for expansions in the Vaikuntha region. So Krishna is present there as Narayana in his four-handed form in all the innumerable Vaikuntha planets. And also within Vaikuntha itself, there is Dvitiya Chaturvyuha, the secondary Chaturvyuha expansion, from which the secondary Sankarsana becomes the source for further expansions. Below Vaikuntha is the material world. So when Krishna's expansion descends to the material world, it is from the Dvitiya Chaturvyuha. So when it descends to the material world, that is known as Avatara. So all the avatars beginning from the Purusha avatar and many other categories of avatars like Lila avatar, Guna avatar, all these are known as avatar because they descend from the spiritual world to the material world. So that is the distinction between other expansions and avatars. Within the spiritual sky, all are known as expansions, but when they descend to the material world, they are known as avatars. Then in 5.39 also, it's stated in Brahma Samhita, Rama Dimuti Sukalaniyamena Tishtan Nanavataram Akarot Bhuvaneshu Kintu Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Parama Pumanyo Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primal Lord, who manifested himself personally as Krishna and the different avatars in the world in the forms of Rama, Narasimha, Vamana, etc. as his subjective portions. So this is regarding the plenary expansions. His subjective portions as the avatars, like Rama, appear from Vaikuntha, and his own form, Krishna, manifests himself with Raja in this world from Goloka. The underlying sense is that Krishna Chaitanya, identical with Krishna himself, also brings about by his appearance the direct manifestation of Godhead himself. So all the expansions who also descend as avatars are also equally good as the Swayam Rupa of Krishna. If we properly utilize the instructions of Bhagavad Gita, then our whole life will become purified. And ultimately, we will be able to reach the destination which is beyond this material sky. That destination is called the Sanatana sky, the eternal spiritual sky. Yat gatva na nivartante tad Dhāma Paraṁ mama. In this material world, we find that everything is temporary. It comes into being, stays for some time, produces some byproducts, dwindles, and then vanishes. That is the law of the material world, whether we use as an example this body or a piece of fruit or anything. So as long as we are in the material world, we will always be trapped in the encagement of temporary material bodies. There are 84 lakh of them. So we'll keep shifting from one body to another, and within each body, for a specified period of time, we'll be trapped and will be subject to the 4 miseries of Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi. So we have to really liberate ourselves from this material world and reach the spiritual world. So we have seen regarding the supreme abode in the spiritual world, but in Nectar of Devotion, chapter 13, there are 5 potent forms of devotional service mentioned. Number 1, reciting in Mathura, worshipping the deity of the Lord, reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, serving a devotee, and chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. So one of these 5 potent forms of devotional service, reciting in Mathura, is also regarded as one of the potent forms because it refers to Dhamvas. Although our ultimate goal is to attain the supreme abode, the Dham in the spiritual sky, we can also, it is best to spend our life in this material world with through Dhamvas. We can even go to the Dhams in this material world and engage in devotional service there. That is recommended in Nectar of Devotion. So the purport also describes the Mahatmaya of Mathura, the Mathura Dham. The various qualities described by Rupa Goswami. regarding Mathura and Vrindavana. So as we know, Mathura is the greater part of Vrindavana. Mathura now it's regarded as a district. Vrindavana is within the Mathura district. So the transcendental qualities of Mathura and Vrindavana are described by Rupa Goswami. And even in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, chapter 8, verse 42, this is the conversation between Dhruva and Narada Muni. Even Narada Muni specially recommends Dhruva to go to Mathura. Even there, he also recommends the Mahatmya of Mathura to for Dhruva to engage in his penance. Places of pilgrimage yield a special advantage for a devotee in quickly advancing his spiritual life. Lord Krishna lives everywhere, but still it's very easy to approach him in holy places of pilgrimage because these places are inhabited by great sages. Lord Sri Krishna says that he lives wherever his devotees are chanting the glories of his transcendental activities. There are many places of pilgrimage in India, and especially prominent are Badrinarayana, Dwaraka, Rameshwara, and Jagannath Puri, the Char Dhams. These sacred places, called the four Dhamas, Dhama refers to a place where one can immediately contact the Supreme Lord. To go to Badrinarayana, one has to pass through Haridwar on the path to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Similarly, there are other holy places of pilgrimage, such as Prayag and Mathura, and the topmost of them all is Vrindavana. Unless one is very advanced in spiritual life, it is recommended that he live in such holy places and execute devotional service there. So for those who are truly sincere about intensifying their devotional service, the Dhammas will also help a lot. So for those who can actually live there, can even try that option to further intensify their spiritual activity. But an advanced devotee like Narada Muni, who is engaged in preaching work, can serve the Supreme Lord anywhere. Sometimes he even goes to the hellish planet. Hellish conditions do not affect Narada Muni because he is engaged in greatly responsible activities in devotional service. According to the statement of Narada Muni, Madhuvana, which is still existing in the Vrindavana area in the district of Mathura, is the most sacred place. Many saintly persons still live there and engage in the devotional service of the Lord. There are 12 forests in the area of Vrindavana, and Madhuvana is one of them. Pilgrims from all parts of India assemble together and visit all 12 of these forests. There are 5 forests on the eastern bank of the Yamuna: Bhadravana, Bilvavana, Lavavana, Bandiravana, Mahavana. On the western side of the bank, there are 7: Madhuvana, Talavana, Kumudavana, Baulavana, Kamyavana, Kadiravana, and Vrindavana. So 12 in total. In those 12 forests, there are different ghatas or bathing places. They are listed as follows. So the Mahatmya of Mathura, and especially Vrindavana, as the topmost dhams in this material world, have also been recommended in the scriptures. So for those who wish to intensify their spiritual activities, can always choose to live there, live in the dham. But for exalted devotees, they can even convert whichever place they are residing in as the dham itself to spiritual activity. So though our aim is to ultimately go to Goloka, back to Godhead, we can actually transform our current place as a dham through our intense spiritual activity. So though our ultimate aim is to go to Goloka, back to Godhead, even during our lifetime in this material world, we should also sincerely try to transform our temporary place of residence into a dham through the association of devotees and also through spiritual activities. So that's all for today's session. Thank you all for attending. So any questions or comments? Anumantan, is that Dr. Parikshit? Hello, Hare Krishna.
Krishna Prabhu. No questions, Prabhu. So far.
Oh, okay. Thank you for attending.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.